The Orioles have reportedly hired their new hitting coach. Can Dustin Lind be the one to turn this offense around? We'll find out coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, November 10th, 2025, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to talk about the Orioles' new hitting coach. As we learned reportedly on Friday, the Orioles will be hiring Phillies assistant hitting coach Dustin Lind to be their new hitting coach. We'll talk about Lind's background in baseball and beyond. And then we'll have a guest come on the show who knows a little bit about Dustin and what he's done in his baseball life to give us some more context on what Dustin Lind could bring to the Orioles. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So thank you all for tuning in here on a Monday episode. You may be able to hear it, you may not. I've been a little under the weather all weekend, trying my best. My voice has come back a little bit to gut my way through this episode. Very happy to have a guest on this show as well today, so I don't have to talk as much as usual. But apologies if there's not the regular voice quality that we usually get here. Trying to grit my way through it here. But the Orioles do have a new hitting coach to talk about, and so we got to get you an episode here. And that new hitting coach is Dustin Lind, a 37-year-old who has been the assistant hitting coach for the Philadelphia Phillies for the last two seasons. Of course, the Orioles basically lost their entire hitting coaching staff after this season. Tommy Joseph, assistant hitting coach, was let go after one season. Sherman Johnson left to take a job with the White Sox. He was the other assistant hitting coach who had been in the organization for a couple of years. And then Cody Ashe, who was hired back in 2022 as a minor league hitting coach, was on the major league staff in 23 and 24 as an assistant, then was promoted to the lead hitting coach this year. He left to be an assistant hitting coach for the Detroit Tigers, which means the Orioles were kind of wide open. And that it was after a season where the Orioles disappointed. Like, they were in the top 10, they were in the bottom 10 of most offensive categories. It was, by the end of the season, kind of the main reason the Orioles only won 75 games here in 2025. We know the pitching was the main culprit in the first couple of months, but after that stabilized, the offense really didn't. And yeah, they traded away some players like Mullins, O'Hearn, and Laureano, and of course had some injuries that played a big factor as well. But even beyond all that, this offense was pretty bad this year. And so the Orioles overhauling some things. I talked about on an episode last week, some potential names. To be fair, I named a lot of names, but one of them was Dustin Lind, and he reportedly is the Orioles' new hitting coach. So Lind has been with the Phillies over the past couple of years in a Phillies offense that has been pretty good. I mean, this is a team that gets to the postseason. They've been 5th and 8th in the majors in runs scored in the past 2 years. They were 4th in team on-base percentage this season. They had the 10th lowest strikeout rate. Those are things the Orioles struggled with this year that hopefully Dustin Lind can bring. Now, his connection to the Orioles is that before coming to Philadelphia in 2024, he had spent 4 seasons as the assistant hitting coach for the San Francisco Giants from 2020 to 2023. And during that time, he worked alongside Craig Albernaz because those were the same 4 years that Albernaz, the Orioles' new manager, was the bullpen coach for that same Giants team. So they spent 4 years on staff together in San Francisco. Had a couple of okay seasons, and had, of course, that amazing 107-win 2021 season that they were there together for as well. When Lind was in San Francisco, he was an assistant hitting coach for the major league team, but also worked as the organization's director of hitting, which meant he was also working on big picture stuff. He worked with a lot of minor leaguers in the Giants system throughout those 4 years as well. Definitely had a lot of kind of different roles in his job in San Fran. And it wasn't his first stop in baseball. His first job in baseball with a team was when he was hired by the Seattle Mariners back in 2018. Now, his first role was as the quality assurance coach for the offense that season. He was also the hitting coach for the AZL Mariners, the kind of lowest rookie ball level in their minor league system, but he worked with a lot of different minor leaguers and major leaguers in Seattle to kind of help with different things. And then in 2019, he was promoted to the Mariners' big league staff to be their director of hitting development and strategies. Not a title you see with a lot of teams at the major league level, but he worked with both minor and major league players in the Seattle organization to what they called optimized development and other things. And he works with some staff as well to kind of bring together his skills, because it is an interesting skill set for Dustin Lind. His path to the big leagues was pretty interesting. He played college baseball at Montana State Billings. That is a Division II school in Montana. Montana is where he grew up. He then transferred to Sierra College, a junior college in Sacramento, California. But at both of those schools playing college baseball, he just had so many injuries that he rarely played, and decided to transfer to Idaho State, a Division I school, and play on the club team there in his final year of college. That's also where his now wife was a track and field athlete at Idaho State, so transferred there as well, and ended up graduating in 2014 with a degree in exercise science. And that's kind of where it took him after college. He went to the University of Montana for their doctorate program and ended up getting his PhD in physical therapy from the University of Montana in 2017. So he is truly Dr. Dustin Lind, who will be joining this Orioles staff. But also after undergrad, he worked as a private hitting coach. And for 4 years, from 2014 to 2017, while he was getting his PhD, before he was hired by the Mariners, he was a private hitting coach that worked with both minor and major league players for those 4 seasons, including some of the hitting stuff he was involved in, but also some of this physical therapy background as well. And maybe that's something that can help the Orioles, because during that time, his full-time job was also as an outpatient orthopedic physical therapist as well. So he's got a lot of this kind of experience that's in and out of baseball that can hopefully help the Orioles here, because, you know, like, he was brought into Philly to help them stop chasing pitches outside of the zone, and they got a little bit better at that in their 2 years, but that's something the Orioles are already good at. They only had the 19th highest chase rate in baseball this season. What the Orioles struggled with is contact inside the strike zone. They had the 4th lowest in-zone contact rate in Major League Baseball this year. That is not good, but both those struggles are kind of similar. You want to find your pitch and drive your pitch, and hopefully Dustin Lind can come in and help the Orioles with that. But the other kind of cool thing that he has done throughout his career, while he still was working in physical therapy and kind of before he was eventually hired by the Mariners and then the Giants and then the Phillies, was when he was working as a private hitting coach, he was also big on kind of hitting Twitter, on social media. There were a lot of other hitting coaches who worked with Dustin, and he had apparently put together like this database of swings, this Google Drive of all these resources for fellow hitters and hitting coaches to use. There's a ton of people who still talk about that resource. He was also one of the first hitting coaches to popularize using weighted bats for bat speed training to essentially swing faster. If you remember, we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the Blue Jays had that huge offensive overhaul, which led them to Game 7 of the World Series this year after winning only 74 games last year. And the big story was they hired a new hitting coach in David Popkins, who had previously been with the Twins and other teams. And Popkins came in, and the big thing he did in his first offseason with the Blue Jays is had a lot of their hitters train bat speed, and a lot of Blue Jays hitters got quicker bats over the offseason, and it allowed that entire offense to break out this year. And for the Orioles, they do already have a good amount of players who hit the ball hard and have good bat speed. So they're already starting at a better spot that Toronto was this time last year. But Lind is a guy who has worked with that weighted bat and bat speed training and was one of the first people to really popularize it. If he can bring that to the Orioles, maybe they can even do another step forward. And there was a good quote, Saris of The Athletic had tweeted this back in 2021. It was after that awesome Giants season. He was talking to Buster Posey, who said, quote, about Dustin Lind and the hitting group, those guys would do all the analytics work, and they had such a great way of relaying it to the players so that it wasn't a burden. And that is also a huge part of being a major league hitting coach at this point, right? You want to have all the data to work with. We know Dustin Lind is going to be someone who's going to use all of that data. But also, if you have a Hall of Fame player like Buster Posey, who is now in charge of the Giants baseball operations, saying something about Lind and how great he was at relaying that information to the players so they didn't get bogged down in all the information, but it still helped that team win 107 games, that is all good things they're going to lead him to, at just 37, becoming a major league hitting coach. And I know some people are going to get upset. Not only did he never play in the major leagues, Dustin Lind never even played in the minor leagues. His baseball career ended in college, really he was a varsity athlete for 2 schools, and then his final year was just as a club baseball player at Idaho State. I get it, being good at something is not what you have to be able to coach something or teach something well. You see that not just in baseball, not just in sports, but across so many disciplines. You don't have to be the most, amazing scientist in the world to be a good professor in biology or chemistry at a college. And it's the same thing. It's a little different. It's a different realm, but you didn't have to be an all-star major league hitter. You didn't even have to play in the major leagues to be a good coach. There are so many managers and coaches who, even if they did get to the big leagues just kind of a cup of coffee and were never known very much, sometimes it's almost better to be a guy who was grinding in your baseball career, never had the true big talent, never had it come easier to you, grinding through that, all that hard work just to get there. Probably molds better coaches who can experiences those things a little bit better, experiences what players go through when they go through slumps to get them out of them. We're not going to really know until it kicks off this 2026 season, but I do like, at least so far, this Dustin Lind hire. But I wanted to hear from others who know him better, and we're kind of part of that revolution that Lind put together a few years back before he was hired by big league teams. So we've got a fun guest coming up next from kind of the hitting coach community who has a lot of great things to say about Dustin Lind. We're going to learn a little bit more about the Orioles' new hitting coach. That is right after this. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything, from who will score next to the fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. And it keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so we have a fun guest joining us here on the Locked On Orioles podcast. It is Matt Pilewski, who is the founder of PBS Baseball up in Pittsburgh, a facility for baseball and softball. That's what, Matt, been around for over a decade now that you've been doing that. And first of all, I want to thank you for coming on the show to talk about the Orioles' new hitting coach.
Thank you, Connor. Happy to be on here speaking with you about a really great guy, an innovator and a mentor to me.
Yeah, so the O's have a new hitting coach in Dustin Lind, and I was looking for just anybody that had thoughts on Dustin, things he'd done in the past, doing my research on him for today's episode because he's coming in. It's his first major league, main hitting coach job. He's been an assistant with the Giants and with the Phillies, and he had the initial job with the Mariners. And, he's on the younger side. You're trying to find, generally assistant hitting coaches don't talk to the media a lot. So it's hard to find a lot of quotes on him and other things he's done. And I found you on Twitter talking about, your history with Dustin and the things he has put together. So where did you kind of first find Dustin's work or meet Dustin or any kind of relationship that was built there?
So I'm one of these guys that I like to give credit to people who have helped me. And so I began tweeting about Dustin probably more than 10 years ago, maybe somewhere. It's been a while. And so, last 72 hours or so, a lot of people have found me because if you search Dustin on Twitter, he's gonna come up. So I started a baseball facility a little bit over a decade ago, and back then there was a lot of message boards and things like that where people were sharing new ideas. And I came across Dustin. I couldn't tell you how, Connor, but I came across his content. Back then, Twitter was populated by a lot of new people. There weren't a lot of old school baseball guys on that platform yet. It really was a cool time. And everybody who goes back that far knows who Dustin is. And after Dustin started to get more into professional baseball, he kind of stopped sharing as much. Maybe that was part of his, new job requirements or limitations or what. But back then, he created a what's called a Google Drive, and this drive was a resource where he put it out there for free. Like a lot of people kind of sell stuff, or he never did. It was basically a public resource where there were voluminous amounts of data, where everything from a gazillion GIFs on swings to a copy of the Science of Hitting from Ted Williams to every kind of study you can think of. He also innovated something called bat speed training, which a lot of people have since monetized. You heard a lot about that with the Dodgers in the World Series. They have I'm sorry, they heard a lot about that with the Blue Jays in the World Series. They had hired a driveline baseball guy, and a lot of drivelines bat speed work, as well as axe bat and stuff like that, comes from the Dustin drive. So he put that stuff out there. I still have it. I still use it. But that resource led a lot of people to not only, monetize and be able to make money off of some of the work that he had done, but also help just people that were trying to help other kids. So I had a son. I tried to help him. It turned into this, right? But there were more people that were just trying to help either their high school team, the community team, or their kid. And his drive and the commentary he would provide and the questions, he was very generous with his time, helped countless individuals back then. And then he kind of went dark and went quiet. I had a young player who was very tech savvy, and I said, how can I get this on my computer? So I literally had him download the entire drive onto an old tower computer. Remember those things? And it's literally in my garage. I looked at it. I turned it on this morning because I knew I'd be doing this, and it's still there. And I have had so many people, Connor, in the last 2 days after he was hired, ask me for copies of the drive. And I tell them, I would share it with you. It's just whatever Google does now, it's not compatible with what that was. So I'll never throw that computer away because I can't move it into something else, or at least I don't know how. So that resource was really something back then. It was ahead of its time. The bat speed training stuff was ahead of its time. The way he explained things and how patient he was, and how he kind of, even as a young man, because he was a grad student when I met him, either at Montana, someplace up there in the upper Northwest there. And the way he would explain what was going on with debate about hitting was very, and I'm much older than him. It was way over my head. And I thought, boy, what a mature young man. He said this one thing, and I use it a lot. I was talking to Bobby Tewksbury about this the other day. Bobby's one of the more well-known hitting coaches in the country. And I said, Dustin once told me that everybody sees their move in a swing, right? You got some snap guys, you got some lower half guys, you got some path guys. Everybody will slow down a swing and see their move, right? And Dustin was always cautioning me and other people that would listen to him on that. And I thought that was pretty insightful for a young man to be like, hey, look, we don't know everything. And there's lots of different ways to do whatever this swing thing is. We're trying to get people to be able to do better, swing, hit a ball. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But boy, as I'm sitting here thinking about that now, Connor, that's some next level insight and maturity for a kid that age at the time. So.
And I know for him too, it's fun because he's going to be one of the only major league hitting coaches, I would think, with a doctorate at this point at the major league level as well, where he graduated with the exercise science degree and then went into physical therapy and got his doctorate there and was really doing that before he got hired by the Mariners. And just in your time chatting with him, the resources that he gave out, I think a lot of Orioles fans, and you get hired for one thing, you're not exactly going to do all the other things. The other thing the Orioles struggled with a lot last season was just injuries. And one of the reasons why they have a whole new hitting team, or at least they will this year, is because a lot of their core group of younger bats spent a lot of time on the injured list. And it was a lot of soft tissue injuries that kept guys out for longer. And I'm not expecting Dustin to also fix that for the Orioles, but it's got to be nice to have someone in the room with that background outside of hitting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This was very much a side thing for him back in the day. His education pursuits were certainly on the front burner. But, I mean, if this was a side thing, Connor, and he did it so well and had all those qualities I just mentioned, imagine how well how he pursued his doctorate and his postgraduate degrees. So I would say you're in really good hands to that on that aspect of bringing in Dustin as well, which I didn't think of until you brought it up.
So we'll talk a little bit more about hitting with Matt in just a moment. But first, we got to step aside for our one quick break here. This episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans and cheering on your team. And let's be honest, getting tickets can be a little bit of a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout. It's frustrating. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives you the advantage back to the fans. Game Time is fast, it's easy, and it's backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. You can pull up Game Time and in a couple of taps, find amazing deals talking about your favorite NFL games for as low as $100. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. So we are joined here today by Matt Pilewski. He is the founder of PBS Baseball up in Pittsburgh, baseball and softball facility, and also has kind of crossed paths many a times with the Orioles' new hitting coach, Dustin Lind, in the past. And we're talking a bit about what Dustin could bring to the Orioles in his first major league kind of full head hitting coach role. He had been with the Phillies and the Giants and the Mariners in different roles. So Matt, you talked about kind of the drive that Dustin was able to put together and how that had helped hitting coaches. I was wondering, just from your perspective, opening up a facility, and I'm sure you're working with hitters every day, not just your own kids, but others, what specifically have you pulled from his resources to help you in your career? Because I think that can be extrapolated a little bit to what Dustin is willing to give and help with all these Orioles hitters he's going to start working with as well.
Number one, the maturity that I talked about earlier, that like everybody's different. There's been a big movement to something called motor preference lately. And I don't think Dustin was calling it motor preference back there, but to kind of piggyback off of what you said earlier about his postgraduate degrees, I think Dustin recognized early on that, man, everybody's different. And be careful about how you instruct somebody to do one thing who looks one way and has mobility limitations or gifts one way, and then maybe somebody who is not like that. And so that was really my first takeaway from him. The second one, of course, is the leave no stone unturned. And when you put out that much information on a drive, it means you've probably looked at it. It wasn't really just something that was just here, let me post stuff and put it on the shelf. I mean, he would comment and talk about it when he had time to do so, and he was very generous with that time. So again, I mentioned the bat speed stuff earlier, but there's a lot of concepts in there that don't directly go after maybe establishment thinking, but offer a counterpoint to, well, this worked for A-Rod, but maybe not for your 18-year-old kid. And having watching or not watching, but having Dustin go dark for a while because he's been in a professional capacity, I have, who knows what he's been able to extrapolate from his experience with better caliber athletes. I bring that up because in my experience, when I train a certain level of a baseball or softball player, there really is a ceiling to what they can do, and maybe even a ceiling to what you're able to learn by working with them. And I would imagine, as Dustin has gone through this with the Giants, the Phillies, and others, he's been exposed to better and better athletes who are more and more capable. And so I would bet that in the last 6 or 7 years where he's been dark in terms of sharing content, but certainly working hard behind the scenes for those organizations, that he has really probably grown into quite a even more capable hitting coach who's probably still true to his old values, that everybody's different. What can we do to help this person move better, see things better, anticipate better? And all those things that I learned from him back in the day, I still pull from them 10 years later. And I've evolved as well, but I still pull from those concepts. And so I'm excited to see what he's able to do for the Orioles. One of my very good friends who's really helped me as well, Kyle Wagner, is a diehard O's fan, and I always tease him about when our Pirates were good in the 70s, the Orioles were kind of like our World Series rivals. So it's kind of a fun thing that we do. So it's just another reason to root for the O's. So I'm excited for Dustin. I'm excited for Baltimore. You got a lot of young talent. Maybe you guys can trade us some of those bats for some of the pitchers we have. So maybe we can make a deal and meet in the World Series again, because wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, you're gonna have a bunch of Orioles fans now in the comments yelling Paul Skeens trade, Paul Skeens trade. I don't think Paul Skeens trade is happening, but maybe Jared Jones is out there and maybe. Something could work here. But I think the other exciting part is I've been kind of exposed a little bit to the motor preferences and working with hitters, because I've become pretty close with Matt Swope, who is the current head coach at the University of Maryland. Previously was the hitting coach. I went to school at Maryland. I worked with the baseball program, all 4 years there, got to travel with the team as their radio broadcaster my senior year, and getting to see Matt work with hitters kind of almost before hitters really started to break out at Maryland, until he started working with guys like Matt Shaw and guys like Ben Cowles and others. Shaw's had a good rookie season for a great Cubs team, and some other hitters who are coming through the ranks from Maryland. Really opened my eyes on just this kind of different way to teach hitters, and not looking at it as just the swing is the swing, but the swing is more about everything your body can do. And I think what should excite Orioles fans is there's a lot of different hitters on this team who probably need a little bit of a jump in production next year for the Orioles to improve. And two guys I really think about for the O's, one is Tyler O'Neill. There are not a lot of hitters built like Tyler O'Neill. His dad is a champion, bodybuilder and weightlifter, and O'Neill's kind of a smaller version of that in his body. And that, I think, has led to a lot of the, he spent more time on the IL than almost any other hitter the past 3 or 4 years. And that's probably part of it is his body, but also when he's healthy, he can be right. So I'm intrigued to see, what can Dustin do with a guy like Tyler O'Neill versus a guy like Jackson Holliday, who's 22 years old and really just put muscle on for the first time last year. He was this little, not scrawny kid, his dad's Matt Holliday, but this smaller kid who was just hitting and hitting through high school and the minor leagues. And he bulked up some last year. Now, how does he use that to address his swing? So I wonder if you just had any thoughts on that, about just working with guys who it's not just different swings, but have different body types when they get to the big leagues, and the stuff that Dustin's done.
100%. I think, as we mentioned before, he's well positioned to work with hitters based on his background in terms of physicality or lack thereof, or mobility or lack thereof. And certainly with Holiday and others putting on more physicality, that's going to help them, one would think, to perform better, especially if they know how to use it. One of the dangers of putting on bulk is sometimes you lose twitch. However, at that level, certainly the Holiday family has some of the best contacts in the sport, and there are a lot of really great minds helping people put on what I call, Spider-Man get juice instead of the Hulk. And so we need to be moving fast, stopping and going. And so we'll put on as much mass as we can, so long as that it supports what we're able to do in terms of twitch and power generation and quick power, rotational power. And so I think that, I've seen early stuff from Dustin on all of those fronts. And again, ahead of its time. To be honest with you, Connor, I didn't know what that stuff meant when I read it 10 years ago, but I do now. And so that's why I'll never throw away that drive. I don't know exactly what I'll turn up next week or 2 months from now or 2 years from now that will be, oh, this young kid was on that early. And he certainly was. And so having different types of hitters like that, it really kind of speaks to the motor preference stuff you talked about. You're seeing that more and more. The do it the way I did it, or this is the way it's always been done, is really, thankfully, being shelved in favor of smart young coaches who are really examining the body, how it moves, what it's capable of, and how the individual responds to certain types of training or environments. And that's a lot of what Coach Swope and others down there have really brought to the front burner for a lot of forward-thinking coaches to at least, if you don't want to jump all into motor preference, that's fine. There's certainly pushback against anything new. But at least be curious enough to listen to what they're saying, because I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of people being different and how you train athletes who are of different backgrounds, different physicality. They're just different human beings. You mentioned some great examples a moment ago. So there's really a lot to learn from that. And I know that both Dustin's professional experience before baseball and his experience now, I'm sure, is make him an exciting hire. I wish we had him here in Pittsburgh. I've always been pining for him, which is why so many of media people have been asking about him in the last 3 days. But Baltimore's very lucky, and you got another fan up here in Pittsburgh in us. So we're looking forward to seeing him.
Yeah, it's awesome. I will say, I think Tyler O'Neill probably built more like the Hulk than Spider-Man, but if anyone can get the Hulk to hit, it sounds like Dustin Lind might be the guy to get the Hulk himself, Tyler O'Neill, to hit. Matt, sure. Thank you so much for joining us. I do want to give you a chance because you were so gracious with your time. I know there's a lot of Pirates fans in Pittsburgh, but we do have some Pittsburgh area listeners to this show as well. If you just wanted to pitch or plug, PBS baseball and what you guys do over there, if anyone's interested.
Yeah, we're a small facility. We've been around this is our 11th year. Created this space for athletes who want to get better no matter what. A lot of facilities will, there's a lot of great players everywhere. We'll make anybody better if you come here. It's a different kind of place, and We're just in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, and you can find us at pvsbaseball.com or on Twitter at pvsbaseball. Same thing for Instagram. So that's where we are. And Connor, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on to talk about a guy that's helped me so much to be able to build this place. And good luck to the O's, man.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun season, hopefully, with this offense getting back on track with Dustin at the helm. We thank you all for joining us. We will be back tomorrow. O's made a ton of smaller roster moves back on Friday. We'll get to all those on Tuesday's episode. Until then, that was Matt Pilewski. I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.